Shopify grows your business no matter how far or big you grow. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Whether you're selling your fans' next favorite shirt or an exclusive piece of podcast merch, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Allbirds, Rothy's, Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in.
This content may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion advised.
I'm starting to realize what I've gotten myself into. That this is a completely different person, entirely from the account online. His face is one I've never seen.
I've heard he became an alcoholic. He became very violent and wound up in a mental hospital. He killed several animals. That's why they ended up locking him up.
From Killer Podcasts. True tales of horror, bizarre happenings, unexplainable events. This is Disturbed. Hello, and welcome back to the show. This week, we're bringing you 5 stories that will have you questioning everything. You think you're safe. You're just out on a date, and they seem really nice. How could you know the terror they'd turn into by night's end? So sit back, listen closely, and dive into the horror. First, a story narrated by Brian Jeffords from an anonymous source. Nothing good ever happens at a motel. Certainly not after dark.
Recently, I went on a solo road trip to meet my family for a small reunion. Our family was starting to break apart again, and I needed to be there. If there was any chance that I could help mend broken relationships, I had to take it. I lived far away from the rest of them, so it was going to be a very long drive, but to me it was well worth it. After about a day of driving alone, I needed to sleep. We all know the dangers of driving when you're tired. I pulled into a motel, which at first seemed perfectly normal. There weren't many people there. I saw a couple who seemed to be the only guests other than myself, and just a few employees. For some reason, I felt slightly on edge, and I didn't know why. I mean, I've been through a lot of shit in my past, so a motel shouldn't be that scary. I knew bad things only happen at motels in horror movies, not in real life. I went to the front desk, got my room, and brought in my bags. It was only one night, I kept telling myself. Yeah, the room was actually cozy and had nice lighting. Yeah, the homey type that comforts you. I had no trouble falling asleep after a long day of traveling. At 2 a.m., I woke up with a start. A weird feeling washed over me, and I felt very uncomfortable. There was a coffee and tea machine in my room, so I got up and made a cup of warm tea, hoping it would calm me down a little. After I finished the tea, I lay back down and attempted to go back to sleep. 5 minutes after I closed my eyes, the motel phone on the bedside table rang. My gut told me not to answer, but I was scared, and I needed to know who was calling me and why. I picked up the phone and just heard a faint buzz, like TV static. I got up and ran to the reception area. I opened the door only to find that it was empty. No one was at the front desk. I could still hear that same faint buzzing sound, and there was a radio playing classical music in the back office behind the reception desk. I told myself this really wasn't that weird. Maybe the receptionist and other employees were off duty and asleep. Maybe this was just some prank call. This thought comforted me a bit, and I decided to head back to bed. I turned around, and a man was standing before me. He was tall, well over 6 feet. "What do you need?" he asked me. I told him about the strange call I had received from the front desk. The man said this was a regular occurrence, and it only happened to people that deserved it. Deserve what? I didn't ask. I didn't want to drag this conversation on any longer. I walked back to my room. Throughout the remainder of the night, the phone in my room kept going off over and over again. I finally got out of bed and stepped outside. The tall man was standing right outside my window with his back to it. "What are you doing?" I asked him. He told me he just wanted some air. I walked away and got a drink from one of the vending machines. I walked back to my room and realized the man was gone, but my door was wide open. I went back in, closed and locked the door, and got back into bed. Yes, I did just ignore my door being wide open. I was so tired that I just couldn't be bothered with anything else. I slept for about an hour, then woke up again to the sound of knocking on my doors. And not just my front door, but my bathroom door as well. I ran to my front door and found that it was unlocked. I flung it open, ready to knock over anyone standing outside. No one was there, so I ran to the front desk again. This time, the receptionist was there. I told him about everything that had happened that night, and he told me I sounded crazy. He said guests never get strange calls in the night, and that whoever told me that does not work for the motel. I brought the receptionist back to my room, and there was no sign of the tall man at all. I never saw the man again, but I know it was real. I know that it happened. All I can say is if you come across a motel with barely any guests, maybe that's for good reason.
Our next story is told by Brandon Alexander Smith about a terrifying experience trying to make a connection on an app.
I've been living in France for a couple years now. I've had a really good time for the most part. I moved here to get away from it all back home and explore myself a bit. I came out as bisexual back before I left, and I guess you could say that it didn't go so well. The people here in France are much more open and accepting, and I've had the freedom to explore my sexuality while I'm living here. There's definitely a hookup culture here. I've had a few different regular partners, so I haven't needed to use the apps much. But last night, I got a message on Grindr from someone new. He wasn't really my type. I guess a bit too much hair, a bit too airbrushed in his photos. Something seemed really off about the messaging style. His responses felt too quick, almost like he was a bot, but also revealing and full of strange details, like how he was feeling alone and really needed the company. The conversation was basically a straight-up hookup request, and I said I was busy that night with work. He wouldn't let it go. I was flattered at first, but became a bit annoyed after. Cut to that evening. after my shift, and it's now very late. My phone has a few more messages from him, and I made the mistake of checking them. He's asking if I changed my mind. I try to steer the chat away from that since he could see that I had read his DMs, but he wouldn't budge. I know now that I should have blocked him. I should have stopped replying. Instead, I made a stupid fucking mistake that I keep playing over and over again in my mind. I let him talk, and I kept the chat going. Before I know it, he's about 100 meters from my location. By the way, Grindr tracks your location. For those who don't know, it shows how far you are from other people on the app. He says he's staying at a place on the same block as me and said that we should hang out. I really am stupid sometimes. I thought this could be fine. I'm going to him. He's staying at a hotel by the sounds of it. He doesn't know where I live. It's all on him. It's cool. I didn't think about it from the other perspective. I was going to him. He was waiting there for me, and I had no idea what I was in for. At this point, it's way late, or rather early, and it's freezing cold outside. I walk around the city block to his place. I find that it's a sort of hostel/lodge with private rooms. Dirt cheap, made for tourists. It's absolute shit. I checked the location one more time, and this is definitely it. There's a lockbox and a couple sets of doors I've got to navigate through. Takes a while. My hands are really numb from the cold and they struggle on the metal. Eventually, I get through into the hall, which is not evenly lit and is pretty much concrete all the way up. I go up the flights of stairs and along the top corridor to the door with his number. The door is slightly open. There's no light inside. I should leave at this point. I don't. I open the door. There's not much light in the hall, and even less of it in this room. I push the door open, but I can't see anything, or anyone for that matter. The room is so small. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, some things started to come through. A dirty bathroom with towels all over the floor and sink. A bed, a closet. There's a TV crackling above the bed. I hear the sound of someone moving, and I see a faint outline of a guy. He says a sort of muffled, "Come in." My nerves are on high alert though, and I stay where I am. I say, "Hello?" back, and I just hear the same, "Come in." I can't really see him still, and every bit of my brain is telling me to leave. I look at the hallway behind me, empty, and when I look back, I see this shape coming out of the dark. This guy is big, absolutely different from his photo. He's fucking tall, like 6'2", 6'4". He's much taller than me, and he's large, a really bulky guy. What really hit me was that he was absolutely soaking wet for some reason, and pretty much naked except for a t-shirt that sticks to him. He's been hiding in this little alcove, and when he walks out, I'm instantly afraid. He reaches a hand out for me, and I jump back and hit the side of the front door.
"Come here."
He says again. He keeps saying that, but I tell him no. I ask if he can turn on the light. I can still barely see his face, but he replies no. He doesn't like the lights on. I get a hand on the door and begin to close it, but he places a hand on the door and it stops. He reaches for my crotch and grabs me. I tell him I'm leaving and that it was a mistake to come here. He puts out his hand for me again, and this time I see more of his face. He's got this look in his eye. The kind of look that a lion gives a wounded antelope before it pounces. His face was completely blank, but his eyes were huge and focused on me. It was absolutely terrifying. I'm starting to realize what I've gotten myself into, that this is a completely different person entirely from the account online. His face is one I've never seen. I take a step back into the hall and fly down the stairs. I throw open the double doors and don't even bother to lock them right, just running right out into the street. I sprinted all the way back to my apartment, lights off, doors locked, blocked. I was an idiot to go meet a stranger, and especially an idiot for ignoring the warning signs my gut kept sending me. Best case scenario, I was about to have the most awkward hangout of my life, or maybe robbed. Worst case scenario, don't even want to think about it. Needless to say, I'll be off the apps for a while.
Our next story is about a real nightmare of an ex, narrated by Kat Carter.
In my senior year of high school, I dated this guy named Tom for over a year. It was not a good relationship. We fought a lot. He threatened me often, and we were always breaking up and getting back together again. You know, just overall very toxic. His parents also had a very rocky relationship. His dad was an alcoholic and beat his mom most nights. I even witnessed it on the rare occasion that I spent the night there. It was scary. Toward the end of senior year, Tom cheated on me at his birthday party, so once again, we broke up. Months later, we tried to get back together, but I realized I didn't like him anymore and called it quits for good. That was 15 years ago, and the last time I ever saw him. Since then, I've heard he became an alcoholic, just like his dad. He became very violent and wound up in a mental hospital. I'm not sure what the details are surrounding this, but I've heard he might be schizophrenic. 9 years ago, I met my now husband. We've been married for 4 years. We have a 2-year-old and another on the way. About a year ago, I got a random text message that just said, Susanna. And, you know, I sometimes get work calls and texts on my personal phone, so I answered, yes. And they wrote back, how are you? I should mention I've had the same number since high school. Now, I didn't respond because I didn't know who it was, and at this point figured it wasn't work-related. A few minutes later, I got another text. "It's Tom. How are you?" When I tell you I gasped, I responded, "I am well, I hope you are too." He responded, "What are you doing?" I didn't respond. A minute later, he wrote, "Do you ever think about us? Do you wonder what would have happened if we were still together? Do you ever think about getting back together?" I sat in silence, reading and rereading these messages, just unsure of how to respond. So finally I replied, "I'm sorry, Tom, but no. I'm married now and wish you the best, but I don't think we should have any form of communication." He just said, "Okay, sorry." I thought this was weird, but, whatever. Maybe the dude was lonely, decided to reach out. Who knows? That was that. Last week, his mother showed up at my family business. I've worked here since high school in different roles. She and his father have gotten a divorce, and she now has a boyfriend that she seems happy with. We exchanged pleasantries, and then she asked, "Did you hear about Tom? He was in an institution." I said yes, and I was sorry to hear it. She said, "He killed several animals. That's why they ended up locking him up." I was too stunned to think of a response to this, so I just repeated that I was sorry to hear it. Then she said, "Yeah, but he's out now. Has been for a while. You were always my favorite girlfriend he had. Do you ever still think about him?" I was not sure what to say to this. I wanted to say, "Lady, that was in high school. No." Instead, I said, "No, I'm married now with a toddler. I don't have much time to think about anything else." I don't know, trying to lighten the mood, I guess. Then she said, "He's not a bad guy. I don't see him that much anymore, but when I do, he still talks about you. He wonders what could have been. Would you ever be open to talking to him?" That is when I shut things down. I told her it was great to see her, but that option was off the table now and forever. I said I had to get back to work. I walked away and hid in the back until she left. What the actual fuck? This high school relationship was years ago. I want no part of him or his family. I'm just so sincerely hoping he doesn't pop up at my place of work. I have no idea if he's still in the area, but I really, really hope he isn't. Bizarre old high school boyfriend, let's not meet ever again.
You're listening to Disturbed. We'll be right back.
Hello everyone, my name is Matt Neglia, and I am the host of the Next Best Picture podcast, part of the Film Entertainment Awards website, nextbestpicture.com. On our show, we explore all year long what is possibly going to win Best Picture at the Oscars. We do this by conducting interviews with people within the film industry, holding weekly reviews of the latest theatrical releases, and on our main show, where we dive into various different topics, answer your fan questions, and also do our best to explore Oscar history's past in hopes that it will tell us something new for this upcoming award season race. We hope that you will join us on all of the various podcasting networks. We look forward to seeing you over at nextbestpicture.com.
On the morning of August 1st, 1966, shots ring out from the observation deck of the clock tower on the University of Texas campus. It marks the infamous beginning of the modern era of mass shootings in America.
You're listening to Stop the Killing podcast. Join us as we take you behind the crime scene tape to explain global mass shootings and mass attacks. I'm Sarah Ferris, but more importantly, this is Catherine Schweit, the former head of the FBI's active shooter program.
I spent 5 years as the FBI's top executive looking for answers to the mass shooting crisis. I've been at the shooting scenes, I've traced heroic acts of bravery, and I've sat silently and listened to the heart-wrenching stories from survivors.
Amongst this horror, there is hope. We all hold the key to stop the killing. You just need to know how to unlock the door. Download Stop the Killing and be part of the solution. Search Stop the Killing on Apple, Spotify, and all the usual suspects.
Welcome back. Our next story is narrated by Terra Ashe from disturbed listener Joanna. If you have a true, terrifying story of your own to share, follow the link in the podcast description.
This happened to me when I was younger, sometime in my elementary school days. It was a Friday night around 9 p.m. with nothing to do, and my mom and I were headed to the Dollar Tree to look around at their holiday stuff. It was early December, if memory serves. On the way there, the car behind us kept switching his headlights on and off at us. I didn't know anything about that as a little kid, and for my sake, I'm sure my mom didn't say a word. My mom usually kept it pretty calm, but I noticed that she started to seem worried, looking through the mirror to try and see who it was, keeping an eye on them. After a few minutes, she called my uncle and her dad to see if they would come meet us at the store, which I thought was weird. Again, I was just a little kid. I didn't know any better. As soon as we arrived at the Dollar Tree, my mom grabbed me and sprinted inside. That was my first clue that something was up. I remember we were in the cookie aisle and my mom kept me close to her like we had glued ourselves together. But I wasn't focused on that because when you're that age, going to the store was like a dream of sweets and snacks. After a couple minutes, I broke free from my mom and ran to pick out some of my favorite cookies. Sure enough, I turned the corner and almost ran into some older man in the next aisle, just standing there staring down at me. My mom quickly joined me, grabbing me by the arm and telling the man to leave us alone. The man was just silent, staring. Without saying a word, a smile slowly crept over his face. My mom absolutely lost it over that, yelling at the man to go away and leave us alone. A few moments later, my grandpa and uncle showed up and walked us to the car. I'm not entirely sure what exactly happened after that. I was kept separate from all that stuff, but I believe there might have been a police report made. That moment stuck in my brain, though, and a couple weeks ago, I brought it up when I went over to my mom's house for dinner. My mom explained the whole situation. It turns out the older man was the father of one of my mom's former friends from high school. The old man had formed some sick obsession over my mom, and it ended the friendship she had with this guy's daughter. She said that from the moment he first saw her, he never stopped complimenting her, which made her very uncomfortable. Thank God my grandpa and uncle came to our rescue. I wonder what the man had planned for my mom and myself. Did he really just follow us to stare at my mom? Even more so, how did he know the exact time we left the house or what car we were in? All I can think about is how he might have been stalking my mom for days, maybe even longer. What a creep.
Our final story is from Reddit user Mars May Riot. When a first date almost becomes your last mistake. Narrated by Kyra Cornett.
About 6 months ago, I was at the dentist's office and I started chatting with a guy in the waiting room. He was super cute and seemed really nice. So we kept talking for a while after my appointment. We exchanged numbers and agreed to make plans later. Red flag number 1. He sent me 30 pictures of himself immediately after we left. I thought that was very odd. A couple days later, we made plans to have dinner. He picked me up at my house, which was not a smart idea. Our conversation over dinner was good until he told me a strange story. Red flag number 2. He said that last year he got into a shootout with his ex-girlfriend's brother. I asked him what caused the shootout, and he said he had no idea. I asked a few more questions about what happened, and he swore that he drove to her house to drop some things off after they broke up, and her brother just started shooting at him, so he returned fire. After that weird story, he said he had 2 tickets to see a soul singer we both enjoyed that following night. And I agreed to go. He took me back home and I gave him a quick kiss. I pulled away and he tried to kiss me again. So I gave him a kiss on the cheek and then pulled away. He leaned in for another kiss, but I said goodnight and went inside. Red flag number 3. After he got home, he texted me, "I thought you really liked me. Why didn't I get a longer kiss?" I told him I like to take things slow and a quick kiss is all I wanted for a first date. He proceeded to send me more pictures of himself. The next day, he picked me up for the concert, which was amazing. I really enjoyed the show. I let him know beforehand that I had a flight to catch at 4 a.m. the next morning, so I wouldn't be able to hang out afterwards. Red flag number 4. While he was taking me back to my place, he asked if I wanted to get a hotel room with him for the night. I reminded him about my flight. Then he asked if I want to get freaky in the car. I couldn't believe a grown man asked me that. I said no, I was attracted to him and I could see us hooking up, but I had already told him I didn't have a lot of time. The final straw was when he asked if he could come inside my house. What part of "I don't have time tonight" did he not understand? At that point, I knew I didn't want to see this guy again. 'Cause I hate saying no more than once, especially to sex. I said goodnight and went inside. About 10 minutes later, I left to grab something from the store and pick up something for a neighbor. While I was driving, I heard my FaceTime going off, but I didn't answer. Once I get into the store, I saw he had called me 10 times in the span of 5 minutes. I called him back thinking I had left something in his car.
"Where did you go?"
"To the store? Why?"
"I thought you were busy and needed to pack."
"I am. I just needed to get a few things. Can I help you with something?"
"It's not nice to lie. You said you were too busy to go to the hotel, but now you're at the store?"
"Well, I don't owe you an explanation of where I need to go. I'll text you later." I hung up, got what I needed, and headed back to my house. When I got back home, I noticed he was still parked out front. It had been 45 minutes since he dropped me off. I asked him if everything was okay, and he shouted to me from his car window,
"Where did you go?"
I said, "I told you I went to the store. Have a good night." I waved goodbye and brought my stuff inside. I was pretty creeped out at this point, but I figured he would leave. I went back out to go to my elderly neighbor, and he was gone. Or so I thought. I drove to my neighbor's around the corner and dropped her stuff off. When I went back to my car, I heard a car racing at full speed ahead. He followed me there. He pulled up right beside me, rolled down his window, and shouted at me,
"What are you doing?"
"Why did you follow me?"
"Because I know this whole area. What house did you come out of?"
"That's none of your business. Please don't follow me."
"If you don't tell me what house you were in and what you were doing, I'm going to call the DEA and police and have them surround the whole block."
"What are you talking about? Our date ended over an hour ago. You should have left then." He drove super fast, and at this point, I realized this guy was nuts. I called my brother and asked him to stay on the phone with me until I got back home. When I got back to my house, the guy was parked out front again. My brother told me to drive to the nearest police station, so I did. I started driving, and the guy started following me again. As I pulled into the station, he realized where we were and finally drove away. I explained to an officer what happened, and he offered to escort me home. When we got back to my house, guess what? Mr. Crazy Pants is parked out front again. He saw the officer behind me and drove away. The officer offered to stay for a couple more hours. I didn't block Mr. Crazy right away because I wanted to be aware if he said anything else crazy, so I would have evidence for a police report. About an hour later, the officer knocked on my door and let me know the guy was idling at the corner of my street and was probably trying to park outside my house again. The officer pulled him over, told him to leave, and escorted him out of my neighborhood. After that, the guy texted me.
I see you're sneaky. I threatened to call the police on you because you were being a sneaky liar, and you called them on me? Real disrespectful. I should have called them on you first.
I didn't call the police. I went to the police station because you were following me.
I was following you for my safety. You lied about where you were going. You know what I've been through.
If you weren't feeling safe, why didn't you just go home?
Why didn't you tell me where you were going?
At this point, I stopped responding and turned my phone off. The next morning, I checked my phone and he had sent me over 50 texts, including memes about trust and respect. I got ready for my flight and my uncle came to pick me up to file a police report. After that, I blocked him. For the next week, I had my uncle or male friend escort me to my house. I never saw the guy again, but he did text me from a texting app, saying that he loved me and wanted to start over. I blocked him again and haven't heard from him since. The most valuable lesson I've learned is to trust my instincts. I knew something was off about him, so I should have never agreed to a second date. Also, never, ever let someone you just met know your address, especially if it's a first date. I've always followed that rule. But against my better judgment, I let my guard down this time, and I could have been harmed.
Want more Disturbed? Check out our Patreon for member-exclusive content, early merch access, and other cool perks. I'm your host, Doug Bailey, and this has been Disturbed, a production of Killer Podcasts and part of the Evergreen Network. For more paranormal and true crime shows, visit killerpodcasts.com. Follow our social channels at Disturbed Podcast on Instagram or Disturbed_pod on Twitter. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing and reviewing on your favorite listening platform. Share your own true horror story at disturbedpodcast.com. Music by Epidemic Sound and by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Our producers are Noah Fouts and Elizabeth Flood. Our audio engineer is Nathan Corson. Executive producers Bridget Coyne and Gerardo Orlando. Until next time, stay safe out there.
24 hours ago, I found out the person that I'd been dating and seeing for the last 6 months is a con man.
That is my sister Emma. Andrew Tonks's lies had been so convincing, she'd invested $300,000 with him. However, the tables were about to turn on Andrew. What he didn't know was that Emma had discovered his real identity. But to get any chance of justice, Emma had to act like it was business as usual. Coming up in this series,
and that's when murder, all this stuff goes through my mind. I'm really, really scared.
I'm assuming Sarah has watched too much Netflix and figures I've been defrauding you. Couldn't be further from the truth.
That's what this was, a real-life story that seems so unbelievable, but it was actually true.
A true story that all starts with one simple swipe to the right. I'm Sarah Ferris.
And I'm Emma Ferris, and this is my story, Conning the Con.